We're still awaiting official polling figures to tell us what the American people thought about the vice presidential debate. However, that's not stopping those in the media from giving their perspective on the showdown, with the opinion largely depending on which network you were watching. So, here to help us analyze some of the responses to the event and give his own analysis from the night is Boyd Matheson, the opinion editor at Deseret News in Salt Lake City, the location of Wednesday's debate. So, Boyd, CNN was actually the first network to release a scientific poll following the debate. I want to show that clip really quick and then get your take on it.
Now for the results. Kamala Harris, the clear winner, according to debate watchers in our flash poll. 59% say she won the debate tonight. 38% say Mike Pence won the debate tonight. And here's some evidence to back that up. What winning a debate means: improving your position from where you went in. Take a look. We asked about whether people had a favorable opinion before the debate of both candidates and after. Look at the progress that Harris made. Before the debate, 56% said they had a favorable opinion of her. After the debate, 63%. She increased her favorability by 7%. Mike Pence held steady. He didn't lose any ground, but he didn't make up any ground.
So, Boyd, 59 to 38, that's a pretty large gap between these two candidates. Do you think that that is indicative of their actual performances?
No, I think the flash polls you got to be really careful of, especially after a debate. Because it all depends on who actually watched, who said they watched, who actually had an experience there. And then you also have to look at what is actually the job to be done in a debate. And it's not about winning a debate. You could say as a prosecutor that Kamala Harris did a great job debating. But the American people don't want a prosecutor in chief. They want a leader. They want a commander in chief. And so you can start debating some of the nuances of that in terms of what actually took place. The most important thing, of course, is to persuade people to vote. And remember, Alex, we've got a large group out there that are off the radar. These are people who, if you ask them today, they may say they won't vote or they are unlikely to vote. But that could really change with a lot of the things coming up, both debate-wise, but more importantly, Supreme Court-wise, in the days ahead.
No, you're exactly right, and that was the case in 2016. I mean, everybody remembers the polls from back then. Of course, national polls were a little bit closer when it came to the popular vote, but you're exactly right. When it comes to the states that matter, it only comes down to a couple 10, 100,000 people to begin with. So really getting an indicator of where they stand, I think, is very important. But with the conversation that was taking place on Fox News, for example, on Wednesday, was that Pence was the winner, contrary to what we just saw in that CNN clip, and due to his performance, but also as a result of Senator Harris not meeting the moment. That was according to, I believe, Sean Hannity. Let's take a look.
In terms of the specific issues, I think it's all about the impression. I think that this was a tie. I think that Kamala did better, obviously, on COVID. Let me finish.
I watched her lie about taxes. I watched her lie about fracking. I watched her lie about the issue of race. And she won't answer a fundamental question about something as profound as stacking the court. I thought that Mike Pence shook her multiple times to her core, and she was visibly shaken.
I tend to agree, and I'm not sure. I really think, I love Geraldo. He's got to get to an ophthalmologist tomorrow as quickly as he can.
So I think the consensus by that panel right there was that she just didn't have a big night. But I think a lot of people would also say that she didn't necessarily have to have a big night, acknowledging where they are in the polls right now. What did you think of Kamala Harris's performance?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is usually in a vice presidential debate, the standard is do no harm. And they both cleared that hurdle. The second bar to clear is, can the American people visualize them, if needed, to be behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office? I think both of them cleared that hurdle last night as well. I think it was a very uneven debate. A lot of that, I think, was because of the moderator. It was very fascinating. There were moments from both of the candidates where they didn't meet the moment. It was almost as if they were being asked, the question was, is the sky blue? And the answer was, well, let me tell you about growing up. And they were just such a disconnect there. It was quite odd. And they're being close to the action there inside the bubble last night in Salt Lake City. A lot of people felt that. There was like this real disconnect of they weren't even coming close to trying to answer the question that was asked. The moderator never held them to account for specifics. And then it was just, let's move on to the next topic. So it was a missed opportunity. This could have been the most significant vice presidential debate in our country's history. But it wasn't, because they failed and the moderator failed to really get to the right space. Important that it was a little more civil. We vote for that for sure. But being civil doesn't mean it was a great debate. If we didn't advance the ball and have conversations about principle and policy and how do you make a decision? What are your guiding principles when you make a decision? We got to get to that kind of conversation.
No, and it's the old saying in debates, too. Answer the question you want to be asked, not the question that you were actually asked. And I think that's what we saw yesterday as well. And it was the same thing with Chris Wallace and as well as Susan Page last night, although I would say she did a better job. A follow-up question. I would like to see a simple, for example, when Kamala Harris didn't answer a question, or Mike Pence, too, on the abortion issue. He's laid out his pro-life stance, but he didn't necessarily say what he would like Indiana to do. But a simple, you have 10 seconds to respond, and if they don't respond like that, then cut them off. You know, I think that's something that a lot of people would like to see. But I want to now pivot to the other side of the spectrum, because if you were watching MSNBC on Wednesday night, they were essentially saying that the vice president was too calm to be effective. But the choice of wording that they used was interesting, to say the least. So here's how anchor Nicole Wallace described it.
The problem tonight is that Vice President Pence appeared flaccid and anemic, and that's going to hurt him with men. I mean, the only people that they still had in their coalition after last week's barn burner from Trump were the sort of grievance voter that is a very vocal and animated part of the Trump base. This performance will not land well with them, because here's the other thing that's on voters' minds, real people. What if Trump takes a turn for the worse and this guy takes over? He had to look presidential tonight, and he just looked limp and lame.
So I don't know. I have a childish sense of humor, so I guess my mind is just that of a fourth grader. But when I was watching that too, I don't actually think that the analysis is necessarily correct. I think that if you look at Vice President Mike Pence, I mean, at the very least, he came off as professional, I would think. Do you agree?
Yeah, and the important words there are quiet confidence. Confidence is never arrogant. And again, remember, the job to be done last night was to talk to the 5 to 8% of undecided voters, and then also that movable middle, again, who aren't really registering in a lot of these polls that are just silently on the sideline right now, and is to give them the quiet confidence. They don't want the bombast. They don't want the rhetoric from the extreme left or the extreme right. They want to have someone who has confidence, not arrogance. And confidence comes from the kinds of things that the vice president was showing last night. Respect for the challenge, readiness for the task, a plan, and then that steely determination to actually get it done.
I think you're right on the money, because, I mean, looking back at 2016, that's what Vice President Pence added to that ticket, someone who leveled a degree of confidence among not only the party establishment, but maybe among those voters who weren't necessarily sure about President Trump's conduct or his personal life or anything like that. And that's what Kamala Harris is trying to do in regard to Joe Biden, but from a even more bigger angle, because there's a possibility that Joe Biden, at 78 years old, he'd be sworn in as the oldest president in U.S. history. So there are concerns there, and it's up to Kamala Harris to prove that she's up to the task if she were to have to step in. But at the same time, just providing that confidence to the average voter who may not necessarily be on board with Joe Biden, as well as the Democratic establishment, because I think it's clear that she is their candidate to some degree. And I think that we may have seen the 2024 matchup, too, with these two candidates. But Boyd Matheson, it's always a pleasure having you on this program. I really appreciate you giving your analysis of last night's debate. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.